Hi, welcome to the first episode in a three-part series of webinars we are calling HIVE-33 series. HIVE is short for High Impact Virtual Engagements, and 33 for the 33 most burning questions to consider when arranging a virtual event. What we'd like to share with you over the course of the series are a selection of different relevant and integral topics to guide you into making critical decisions for your next virtual events. This webinar series is brought to you by PFMD, Global Conference Organizers, and European Patients Forum. My name is Pakarinen, and I'm a program manager at Patient Focused Medicines Development, PFMD. And here with me today are Elena and Sean, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves. Elena, why don't you start?
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Chi. My name is Elena Balestra, and I'm Membership and Capacity Building Manager at the European Patients Forum. We do represent the voice of patients at European level. I'm really happy to be with you today.
Hi, my name's Sean Baulk. I work at GCO as a team lead. We look after 250 events a year. As you can imagine, this year's been mainly virtual. Yeah, I look forward to answering some of these burning questions that you guys have today.
Thanks, Sean. As a reminder, these episodes are a mix of pre-recorded content and live content, so we will go live right after this pre-recorded message. Your mics are muted, but you can interact with us using the chat function. So please go ahead and type your questions in there, and we'll take them up after the presentation. Over to you, Sean and Elena.
So Sean, we have a lot of questions to ask you today, but before that, I would like to invite you to introduce the Circle of Seven and basically what we're going to base our webinar series on. If you can say a few words.
Yeah, sure. So this was a formula that me and my team put together when deciding how we were going to engage with our meeting owners and create their virtual events. Essentially, it is pretty much risk mitigation for every stage of your organizational process when creating your event. Of course, you start with the basic questions, and then it leads into 6 other very important pillars. What I want to mention about these pillars are that, of course, they're all relatively important depending on the type of event you're trying to pull off. However, they don't necessarily have to start in any one order other than the basic starter questions for obvious reasons. So, you might not be ready to talk about presenters or speakers as the second stage. So don't take it as when we're discussing these things today that these pillars need to be followed in a particular order. They will organically be spoken about within your organization when the time arises. When I talk about the 33 questions, of course, people are going to go, 33 questions, that doesn't seem like a lot of questions to ask in this virtual world. And you're probably right. There are hundreds of thousands of questions that you could potentially ask yourself when talking about virtual events. However, these are kind of the 33 questions that I felt were really important to my meeting owners and my team's meeting owners over the course of this difficult 7 to 8 months organizing, virtual engagement, especially converting a lot of face-to-face events into fully virtual or some sort of hybrid. So that's the background of the Circle of Seven. Today we're going to begin with 2 pillars: the basic starter and the presenter speaker questions.
Yeah, no, thank you, Sean. And absolutely, I think we should see this as a menu, right? So as the thing that you should not miss out, but you can ask yourself and your team a bit whenever the time arises, right?
Yeah, for sure, exactly.
So moving on, we have definitely the basic questions we need to ask ourselves before kickstarting any events, an online meeting kickoff and really project. But before cracking the challenge and starting asking you, bombarding you with questions, actually, I would like to start with our audience and ask a question to them. We often ask ourselves this question. So it's like, which day is considered by many the best day and the best time to organize a virtual engagement, a virtual meeting? We're giving you a few options. You should see on your screen the actual options popping up. So the 4 options are Thursday afternoon, Monday morning, Tuesday midday, or Monday evening. As we are pre-recording this session, we'll answer to your to the poll only at the Q&A live session that will follow this pre-recording. So you are forced to stay with us for the rest of this session. Well, now Sean, is really your turn to tell us everything you know about what we should do when organizing the basics of a meeting. And the first question for me to you is, when is the meeting taking place?
Thanks, Elena. Great starter question to kick off. So I think there are 2 things that you should look at when deciding or informing your decision. One is, how long is your program going to be? So is it going to be 30 minutes, an hour, 1 day, 3 day, 5 day? How many sessions are going to be part of that particular event? Is it going to just be one long session, a couple of sessions, 5 or 6 concurrent sessions over 3 or 4 days? And then on top of that, adding in the complexity of the event as well. The second thing that should be considered is the time zone. So, of course, if you're lucky enough to have an audience or participant list that is based in one time zone, I congratulate you and wish you well, because you don't have to have any consideration in terms of time zone. However, as you know, in this global marketplace, a lot of our audience is spread all across the world, and we have to consider these challenges. So, I think I was organizing an event the other day that had an East Coast, Central European and Asian time zone. And of course, that created some challenges, and it was a major consideration when moving forward with the strategy of our meeting. So definitely a big consideration. Now, when it comes to the complexity, just obviously take into account the fact that we should make sure that we understand the meeting and what we're trying to achieve. So not to add too much complexity into the meeting if it's not needed. So if you've got a 30-minute meeting, you're not going to throw a lot of engagement into those sessions. Whereas if you have a 4 or 5 day meeting, there's a lot more time to employ those type of complexities.
Super, thank you. Moving on to the next question. So this is absolutely key. So what is the purpose of the meeting that we want to organize?
Yeah, that's a really a good question. I think sometimes people just jump straight into, okay, we're organizing a meeting, and they don't really iron out what is the actual crux of the meeting. What are they trying to do? So, are they trying to motivate a team? Are they trying to, educate an audience, celebrate a good job done over the course of a year? Maybe even evaluate a drug or a product, or some sort of process. So I think this is very important when coming up with a strategy. What are you actually trying to achieve during that session? And then the second part of that is also, is this going to be purely a presentation or a collaboration? So when I say a presentation, is it going to be me, Sean, talking to Elena and a group of people, and it's going to be very one-sided with no feedback whatsoever, which is fine. I think there's many instances where this is required, certainly in certain businesses where a message just needs to be relayed straightforward to an audience, a group of people with very little feedback. However, what I do notice is the majority of companies or meeting owners that we deal with do want collaboration. So this is a meeting where it's a two-way street. So you have some presenters obviously presenting to an audience and giving their content, but you're getting the feedback from the audience in some way, shape, or form, whether that be through actual audio, visual, or through some sort of polling or Q&A, sessions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think if we overlook this side of things, then all the castle can really fall really, really easily, right? So we can really organize the best possible event. And then if we overlook the purpose of the meeting, we can really create a bit of a recipe for a disaster. Then moving to the next question, which is a very project manager question, but we should all ask ourselves this thing. How will the success of the virtual event be measured? How can we make sure that we achieved the purpose we set for ourselves?
Yeah, so, no longer are the days of just, audience participation the most important thing, especially when it comes to virtual, because of course in a live a meeting, when you have a listening to, whether they take it in or not is obviously up for debate, but they're in that room nonetheless. In this virtual format, of course, attendance can be deceiving. So if you have a goal of having 500 attendees, that's a great, that's a great target to have, whether it be 500, 1,000, 1,500, 10,000 people, that's great. But I think what we really need to do is, take a deeper dive into the analytics. And we will talk about analytics a little bit in another episode. I think episode 3, we'll dive a little bit deeper in what analytics can do. But essentially for this question that I'm answering right now is, look at, which sessions are popular, because if you know what sessions are popular, you know how to replicate them in other sessions and make sure that you keep the popularity of those sessions going rather than, dropping them for no reason at all. See how many active attendees you actually have on, on the session. So there are analytics that can show, is this person actually physically watching the session, or are they, playing video games in front of their screen and they have the session on in the background, So I think that also tells you the level of engagement that people are having with that session. And then another really important one, and I think Chi mentioned it to me earlier, was, about people that struggle, with, engaging with this online content, maybe because they don't have access to, a solid internet line or, a laptop. And I think what you can do there is you can use analytics to discover what your audience is using as a medium to watch this content. So if you see an audience that is watching a lot of stuff on their mobile devices, that pushes your decision to use technology that is mobile based or mobile friendly, so that you're getting the best out of your presentations. And I'm kind of going off topic a little bit, but if you're talking about people struggling to engage because of lack of laptop or lack of internet capability, you need to choose solutions that have got low bandwidth, maybe even use on-demand content to that audience, because this means that when they do get Wi-Fi, eventually they'll be able to download the content and watch it in their own time. So there's different ways that we should look at it, and we shouldn't just be focused on just the live element, for sure.
No, I think this is absolutely key, because what it can go wrong in this sense or well is that if we catch the right target group and we use the right tool, then our event can be much more successful than if we didn't really understand well our target group, because maybe our event wasn't successful not because it wasn't a good event, but because we got the tool, the the vehicle a bit wrong, right? So that's also quite important to keep in mind when organizing those things. And the learning component, I think it's also very important, right? Because overall, for example, someone like EPF, they've never done big online events. It's all about learning as well, and testing and piloting different options for the organization and the virtual events. Moving on, and I know that for patients organization, this is in general no profits organization, this is a kind of a key questions. What are the budget considerations, like when talking about money? How much money is enough money?
Yeah, I think I was speaking to yourself and Chi about this the other day, and I was saying, when you're talking about budget, of course, everyone's trying to tighten their purse strings and get the most out of their budgets. I think what you really need to decide on is what is your budget, before you start going out into the marketplace and deciding what you want. Because I had a situation the other day where I had a client, who wanted all the bells and whistles, the spaceship, if you like, of virtual eventing and engagement tools. But then when I came back to them with the price, they very much wanted the moped of engagement tools. And that's fine. That's not a problem. I mean, you can still get a lot out of, very simple or even free web streaming services. It's really how you use and engage with them. But I think you need to be honest with yourself about your budget before you start, because of course, if you try, if you look at things that are way too complex or things that are, too expensive, it kind of just prices you out of your strategy, so to speak. So, and also it creates disappointment with your stakeholders, because of course, if you're already starting to say, oh, we're going to use this and we're going to do that, and then you don't really have the budget for it, it can lead to a bit of disappointment. So I would say the main thing with regards to budget, especially in the association world, is really knowing your budget and what limitations you have there.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. And there is also, I think, the psychological component on having, Rolls Royce in your hands and then not know how to drive it and don't feel comfortable in it. And I think that's also very important for many organizations, that you should, the tool you're using should reflect who you are and where you want to go, right? So that's also important. No matter if you can afford a Rolls Royce or just a very simple bicycle, for example. But I think now it's again time to ask a question to our audience. And now we move into a different dimension, I would say, in terms of what is mostly important when we're talking about online events and online engagement. What do participants consider the most important factor when attending a virtual event? And you should see the question popping up on your screen, and we're giving you 5 options, actually, 4 options. User-friendly technology, content, engagement tools, or networking areas. As before, you will only receive the right answer after the end of the recording during the Q&A session. So bear with us. And now, moving on to a different type of questions. Right? We covered the very basics, and then moving on towards like looking at from the audience perspective. What do you want participants to say about the meeting after they attend?
Yeah, this is a great question, and to be honest with you, I've decided in many cases here to turn this kind of question on its head and go with what is it you don't want your audience to say at the end of an event, right? Because I think if you know the answers to that question, it can create a lot of risk mitigation moving forward. So I've obviously arranged a lot of meetings over the last 7 to 8 months, and I've kind of created my own little mini circle of 7 with regards to this question. And these are kind of the top 7 questions that I get. So number 1, and this actually might be giving the answer to the polling question away. So sorry guys, but if you chose content, then you were absolutely right. this is one of the biggest complaints we face from audiences, is that the content was derivative and boring. It wasn't what they expected. It wasn't engaging enough. The other 6 things that I mentioned now are all really important, but I think one of the thing you really need to focus is on the content. Don't worry about the technology. Don't worry about the polling question. Don't worry about like how the poll will go onto the screen. Just make sure the content is relevant and that it brings the audience in and creates, a discussion. Some other things that are mentioned on the regular are the sessions are way too long. So, please consider that. We always say in our line of work, if you had an hour face-to-face meeting planned and you turned it to virtual, it would only be 1/3 of the time. So essentially 20 minutes the session would be. So if you had an hour session, plan it for only 1/3 of that. Don't make people sit for long periods of time. I think we're all aware that there is a lot of Zoom fatigue going around already, just due to the nature of our world right now. So making people stay for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours long, it's just not a feasible option. Another thing is the audio was bad. Now, I can say a lot of things about the technology, but the one thing that needs to be good is the audio. You can lose the visuals of the speaker. I mean, I'm pretty sure no one needs to see this pretty face. But when it comes to the audio, they need to hear what I'm saying. Otherwise, the content is completely lost. So making sure that and we'll get into this with the speakers, but making sure that the audio is being checked to make sure that it's working and completely clear is really important. Another important one is not enough time for Q&A. So at the end of this session, we're hoping to give people 10 to 15 minutes, which is, an achievable goal. But, do not create a session with a live Q&A and then only give 10 seconds at the end because you overran, right? So, it's like, hi guys, thanks for attending the session. 10 seconds of Q&A, and then you jump off, because it just totally destroys the level of engagement that's needed from that session, and you lose a lot of introspection from your audience. That which is what people want at the end of the session, is loads of engagement, right? I'm not going to go too much into this because we'll talk about this in a later episode about technology. But make sure your technology is consistent. You don't want people in sessions and then they're getting dropped out or they lose the feed because of the technology. Because what you'll find is once you lose them, they won't come back. And then another thing is not enough engagement. So, it's all nice having, the Q&A and polling functions, but, if you only use them once in the section, is that enough engagement? So really look at like the tools at your disposal and use them to your advantage. And then finally, and most importantly, no ODC, so no on-demand content. And I will talk about this a lot, to my clients, is make sure that this content is available well after you finished, because there's an audience out there even after the live event that's willing to consume that content. So it's just a press of a button to say record, and no harm, no foul. So those are kind of my 7 kind of watch outs, things that you don't want to see from an audience at the back end of your event.
Yeah, no, I think that's incredibly helpful. And if I can summarize, it's basically that the online content should be much more curated than a face-to-face event, right? So you have less chances of improvising, and you need to stick to the right time and the plans. So let's try to do that today as well. So moving on to the actual second pillar of our discussion today. So we focus on the first very, very basic question we should ask ourselves, and now we're moving towards the people that will deliver actually the content, which are the presenter and the speakers. And I have obviously a set of questions for you on the topic. Well, first and foremost, who are the presenters? And with this, I mean, really are part of the organization, who they are, and so forth.
Yeah, so this is a good question, because when we say who are the presenters, we're not talking, okay, is it going to be Bill Gates or the specific presenter? We're talking about where is this presenter coming from, with are they going to be an internal speaker, part of your organization, or are they going to be an external speaker, someone that you've brought in from outside to talk towards the content? Now, the reason why I mentioned that is during the planning phases of an event, if you have a group of internal speakers and only internal, what you will find is that it will be easier to align, easier to engage with that community of speakers. Generally, they will be more flexible, and they will also align with the goals that you're trying to achieve for your meeting. Now, with external speakers, I'm not saying that that isn't possible, you know, that they won't be able to align or things like that, but I have noticed, based on my experience, that when you have external speakers and they're outside of your organization, it is harder to align with them. It is harder to get that meeting, you know, to talk about their content. And, you know, in some of the, you know, I don't want to say worst cases, but problematic cases is probably the best way to put it. You know, they're not aligned with the goals of the organization and the content that they're trying to deliver. In other words, they have their own agenda. And that can be quite problematic to the meeting owner, because of course they have a specific message or viewpoint that they're trying to get over to their audience. And if that doesn't align with your speaker, you know, it can create, you know, quite a lot of frustration. So, you know, in terms of how to avoid these things, like I said, I think with internal it's a little bit easier, but with external speakers, you know, align with them as much as possible. You know, have, you know, bi-weekly or at least monthly meetings, depending on the scope or, you know, length of planning phase that you have for your meeting. You know, always create timelines and milestones of what is expected from your speakers, so that they are completely aligned. You know, don't leave it half-baked, so to speak. You know, just get the presentation over to me whenever. What I would actually say is, you know, really create hard deadlines for your speakers. And when I say that, create hard deadlines with buffers. So, you know, I was talking to you guys before we went live for this, or pre-recorded for this event, is that I had a case of 140 recordings that I had to do a few weeks ago, and we made sure that we had a 2-week buffer before we actually had to deliver the pre-recording. So we needed the content 2 weeks before. Well, that's what our presenters at least knew. We knew that there would be 3 or 4, 5, maybe 6 people that were going to come late, and that 2 weeks gave us the buffer we needed to make sure that we were completely aligned. We had all our presentations, and we could just breathe a sigh of relief that we had everything ready. Whereas if we had just said, oh yeah, you know, the deadline day is the day before the pre-recording, I think there would have been a lot of stressed individuals, so to speak, you know, trying to align and get those presentations over. Because what I think a lot of people don't understand is that there is a process that the recording team needs, so the AV team need, to get all these presentations in place and align, especially if there's a lot of sessions.
You know, absolutely. It goes back again to the curated type of work that online events really bring. Moving on, well, looking at location, obviously a virtual event, it looks like that is happening nowhere, but people should meet somewhere to speak. And where will the speaker be physically located when you record or when you go live? What is the best?
Yeah, so this is also kind of like a two-pronged question. So where will the speakers be located? So of course, as we spoke about with the audience earlier, we were talking about time zones. So of course, you know, speakers might have particular time zones that don't necessarily align with the goals and agenda of the meeting owner. Now, of course, we've talked about this before, pre-recorded content. This is a way around it. You know, we can pre-record that particular person and either present it as on-demand content on the site, or present it as a recorded session during the live event days. Of course, you know, you might lose some of the engagement in terms of Q&A if that presenter is still not there. However, questions can be asked and they can be pulled out of the analytics so that this can be, you know, followed up after the event. So it's not a perfect solution, but it's definitely one that can be used in extreme situations. But like I said, always consider the time zone. But actually, the second and I think the most important thing with regards to where will the speakers be located is actually where will they be located when they're presenting to you, right? So I've got lovely Elena and Chi here today. They found themselves a nice quiet spot somewhere in their abodes to give this presentation, right? I can tell you I've been privy to a congress a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, where a high-level speaker was sitting in their living room, and to be honest with you, the visuals were great. However, they didn't plan for their gardener to be mowing the lawn right outside the patio where they were giving the presentation. So I can tell you right now that presentation got completely lost in the ether. The only thing I was focusing in was the buzzing noise of the lawnmower. So, you know, really speak to your speakers and your presenters, and try and make them aware of how important, you know, delivering this content in a quiet, you know, well-lit space is. Of course, you know, there's always challenges and there's always exceptions. But I think, especially if you're delivering a lot of sessions, if you can give people some tips and tricks, or, you know, make sure that they're aligned with your goals, that at least, you know, you can mitigate some of that risk. Not all of it, but some of it.
So moving on, this is really thinking of, and these are twofold questions, I would say. So we know big panels for face-to-face meeting, and what is the size of a panel, let's say, in an online event, and link it to that. Do we need a moderator? What is the role of moderator in an online session? If you can enlighten us on this.
Yeah, so I think you might even have a three-pronged question here, to be honest with you. So when it comes to the panel sessions, I think this will lean into the technology as well a little bit. So, you know, I've had people that go, oh, I need 10 people on my panel. There are some technologies, or a lot of technologies, that don't do 10 speakers as part of a panel. There are some technologies where you can have speakers that aren't visual and can speak and have 10 as well. So, you know, that's a very practical thing to think about, you know, in terms of how many people are actually on your panel. When it comes to the moderation, that's a really great question. So we were talking about this moments earlier. You know, for me, moderation, it can be a very useful tool, but it can be an expensive tool as well. So if you have a moderator internal inside your organization, that's great. You know, use them to the best of your ability. However, do not use moderation where moderation is not needed. So I'll give you an example. I have a group of individuals that they do regular webinars, you know, once or twice a month. These individuals have a very good knowledge of the content that they're delivering, and they have a very good personal communication with each other because they've done it for many years. In that situation, delivering a moderator for that session would kind of be a little bit redundant. Where I think moderation is the big winner is when you have a group of speakers, especially speakers that do not know each other, and you want to pool and align the content of those individual speakers together and create some engagement between them, because maybe they're a bit nervous to speak in a group situation. So, you know, look at your sessions, look at the people delivering, and decide for yourself, is moderation worth the financial cost to deliver that particular session? And if so, definitely go ahead, go ahead and do it. Another part that I want to mention is, and I kind of joked with you earlier as well, is, you know, there's a phrase that says, you know, more money, more problems. I have a phrase, you know, more speakers, more risk. So, you know, the more speakers you have, the more sessions you have, it creates a difficult dynamic. So if you're having, you know, a 30-minute session, and this particular person can only do it live with no pre-recording, the risk is very low. However, if you're doing 140, sessions, and you're requiring to do them all live and expect that everyone's webcam is going to work, everyone's audio is going to be perfect, there's going to be no drop of the internet line, you know, it's just not a realistic prospect, you know. So in those situations, what I tend to do is try and mitigate the risk as much as possible. In certain cases, keep maybe the opening session as a live session to keep it as interactive, as engaging as possible, and then make your concurrent sessions or your smaller breakout sessions, pre-recorded to mitigate the risk. I think that's really, really important. I can't emphasize the importance of pre-recorded sessions enough when there's a high level of or a high amount of speakers involved.
and we are pre-recording even with 3 people probably in the same country. So we're opening a new way. So giving you the time to breathe for a second, Sean, I think it's time to engage our audience. And before asking you the same question, I'm going to ask it to the people that are watching this recording. What is the most requested accessibility tool by Sean clients or every client engaging in an online event? And we're giving you 4 options again. So sign language, content translation, closed captions, or simultaneous translation. And this time, Sean will give you the answer before the end of this of the session, because I'm going to ask him right away. But few seconds of pause to give you the time to answer. And now I think, Sean, yeah, that's the question I wanted to ask, and I think it's a very burning question actually. What languages and accessibility tools are mostly required by your clients?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, and I've got to say it's a very difficult question to answer in the sense of course, once again you need to know your audience. You need to know the people that you're presenting to. However, I do want to look at it in kind of an interesting way, because I think a lot of the times we look at this as an audience tool, you know, so an audience tool that we need to use to make sure that we're being as accessible as possible to the participants of our event. However, there is a portion of the audience that we don't think about, and that's the speakers. And what do I mean by this? So, and I'm going to use an example that I've used a few times with meeting owners. So we have a speaker. He's very well-renowned professor based out of Russia. He knows his content very well. He's the only guy that could probably present his content, because that's how knowledgeable he is. He has a good understanding of the English language, so he can present fairly well in English. However, his accent is very, very thick. And I'm sure people have come across this before. You're watching a session, you really engage by the slides, but maybe English isn't the first language of that particular speaker. This is where closed captioning comes in. I think closed captioning is a useful tool that can really help your speakers, especially the ones that have very thick accents, help engage with their audience better. So I know that I've been discussing this with Chi before, that not every single web streaming platform offers closed captioning. One off the top of my head is MS Teams, that offer quite a robust closed captioning tool. However, I just want to be very clear that speaking to a lot of my suppliers in the industry, this is definitely on the roadmap of most web streaming companies. So I think they see the importance of closed captioning. They see the importance of accessibility with regards to participants, and it's definitely on their roadmap of things to introduce. What I would also say is, and this is kind of whether you have the finances to do it, is, and we go back to ODC again, on-demand content. What I've also seen done is someone has produced on-demand content in English. However, they had a very big Arabic audience. So what happened was they took the on-demand content and they actually physically dubbed the audio to explain the slides. So another exact reason why on-demand content is so important, because it can be leveraged in so many other ways, after the event, and accessibility is one of them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I wanted to add you from a personal experience that it's not only non-native speakers that you should look after, but it's also native speaker with a thick accent if you have an international audience, because sometimes native speakers are way more difficult to understand for non-native speakers than. So that's also something that we should absolutely keep in mind, that there are some accents in English that we are not, as international audience, we're not really used to listen to. That could be absolutely challenging. We're moving towards the end of this presentation, and I think I have a last question, a very important one, and a touchy one for some people as well. Do presenter speakers require training for online speaking engagements?
The simple answer is yes, yes, and yes.
And
I
yes.
can't, and yes again, yeah. I can't emphasize this enough. I think, you know, seeing, you know, how our world has changed over the last 7 to 8 months, we've obviously had a lot of meeting owners that we engaged with before the crisis, who ran a lot of face-to-face events, and they would come to us and go, you know, so-and-so, he's so great, we love him as a speaker, can we get him on board? Can we, you know, can we make him part of this event? The consideration that wasn't made was the fact that this person was such a great speaker because he or she had the tools to deliver great face-to-face presentations, right? So when the subject was broached about doing training, it was pushed back quite heavily because no, they don't need training. They're, you know, we've seen them live. They do a great job. The problem with that is, of course, the visual of the virtual world is completely different. The medium is completely different. The way you come across is completely different. And a lot of the times people are doing this at home with their children running around in the background, or, you know, there's a kitchen on fire, or someone's ringing the doorbell. So it's a completely different environment. And it's one that, you know, I think should be broached even with the most seasoned presenter or speaker, no matter how you know, well you know them. Which also brings in kind of a second part of the training, which is the rehearsal process. So there's obviously, you know, training people on virtual and how to present virtually, but then there's actually the rehearsals of that particular content. So I am a big proponent of rehearsals. You, myself, and Chi spent at least an hour and a half, you know, going through the slides and discussing this before we came live today. And we've had many discussions in the lead up to this this particular webinar. And that whole process has helped us, you know, deliver the end product today. What you tend to find is when people don't have rehearsals, they can become quite stagnant. They can look down at their documents. They're not prepared, and it doesn't look great to the outside audience and to the people at home watching. Another part of the rehearsal process that I also want to discuss is, you know, don't underestimate using different tools when doing the rehearsal process and the live process. So right now, today, we're using one particular product. However, if we rehearsed on another product, so let's say we rehearsed on MS Teams, for instance, and on the live days you made me use another tool, I would feel wholly uneasy. I wouldn't know which buttons to press. I wouldn't know, you know, where the mute button is. It creates confusion with the speakers. So I think when we're doing the rehearsal, it's very important to rehearse with the product you're actually planning to use on the live day. And yeah, you know, in finishing, I just want to say, if anyone tells you they don't need to rehearse, I would say you need to make them. You need to make them rehearse.
How can you trick them? It's like say that you need to test the technology, or it's for someone else's benefit. Because sometimes you really get some people that say like, oh no, I'm too busy to.
What I tend to do is a little bit of a trick. I tend to say, oh, we're just doing a technology check or a systems check. So you do the systems check. Yeah, exactly. So you do the systems check, and then when you're in there, don't you mind going through the content with me, just, you know, quickly? And you know, there's a few little tips and tricks that can be used. But you know, whatever you can do to get that person to rehearsal, you know, try it. Like I said, once again, it's all about mitigating risk. And bottom line is, the more people you can get on those rehearsals, the better it is for you. Of course, it's never going to be perfect. You're not going to get everyone on rehearsals, but the more you do, the better it is for your event.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sean, for all your work you put into this presentation and answering those questions. That was my last for today, and I can hand it over to Chi.
Great. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Elena, for taking us through the 10 first burning questions to get started if you want to create a high impact virtual engagement. Today we tackled the first two of the circle of 7, so let's go live to see what questions you might have.